Safety announcements, evacuation details and information are located on the wall near the entry to the chambers. In an emergency alarm will sound, wardens will assist with your evacuation from the building. If directed, please evacuate in a calm and orderly manner via the reception area. Go directly to the evacuation point in the car park beside the town hall. Are the audio and visual recordings on? Yeah, thank you. I now declare the meeting open at 3:01 p.m. There's been no apologies received for this meeting. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Palator and Panahia past peoples, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we gather today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'd also like to welcome the newly incoming Councillor Christine Cronshaw to her first meeting. Welcome and congratulations. Moving on to the confirmation of the minutes that council receives and confirms the minutes of the last ordinary council meeting held 21st of January. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Loader, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Dudman, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. No. Those against?
No, abstain, please.
Yeah, Councillor Cronshaw is abstaining from this vote as she was not at the last meeting. Thank you. So that was Johnson, Cameron, Dudman, Smedley, Temple, Sinfield, Loader and Housework 4. Thank you. Declarations of interest.
Mayor, we have one declaration of interest today from yourself, actually, for item 12.1, which is our planning authority item today.
Thank you, General Manager. So we've got the council workshop report, which is on page 8, which shows what the workshop was about on 29th of January. We then move on to page 10, which is the Mayor and Councillor reports. Are there any other council acknowledgements or announcements? That's not included. Councillor Loader.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the joy of attending local artist Cindy Watkins' exhibition in Ulverston on Sunday. It's at the Hive and it will be there for a few months, I believe. It's an amazing work of textile art, very intricate, and I would commend it to my councillor colleagues as well as the community to go and check it out in Ulverston.
Thanks, Councillor Loader. Anything else, councillors? Councillor Sinfield. With your microphone, please, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two things. I attended the Blackstone Heights Community News meeting on the 5th of February. Councillor Loader was probably out as well, and has mentioned. And I also had the privilege of opening the Pacifica and Timor-Leste Cultural Showcase at Alverson Drive on the February, and so I don't forget first up to congratulate staff member Alison for her significant effort in assisting in putting that event on. It was a great afternoon, evening. I've heard estimates of 500-600 people present, and I would strongly recommend it to everyone next year if it's on again, which I suspect it will be. If the world somewhat like it is today. It was a really great event and enjoyed by everyone, and so yeah, I commend everyone to attending if possible.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank our council staff actually for putting on such a great event for the Australia Day Community Event and Volunteer Awards. I think everybody who attended would say that it was absolutely fantastic, and people were dancing and singing all night long. So really just a massive shout out to those that were involved in organising it, and congratulations to all of the volunteer award winners.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other? Councillor Temple.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sinfield and I attended the, what was it called, the economic seminar last week. I don't know if I've got the right title, but it was brilliantly run. It was a worthwhile event. It's thrilled to be there, and hopefully some good things will come from it.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else, councillors? Take that as no. Well done. Thank you. Reinforce what was said regarding the staff. General Manager, please pass that on to the staff involved in those things that occurred. Moving on to petitions on page 12. No petitions were received for this meeting. Are there any from the gallery? Take that as no. Thank you. We have one community representation. Page 8. Okay, my apologies. Community representation. Helen, you have community representation. You'd like to take the microphone and introduce yourself, please. Anthony, is the microphone's up there? Yes, so it's already there. On there. Got turned on. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is a statement regarding the closure of the Deloraine tip, proposed closure of the Deloraine tip. The council has a climate change policy, and I'm concerned that consideration of any increased carbon emissions through transport to any proposed new site haven't been taken into account. I'm sure you're well aware that emissions are going up, that climate change is producing increased heat, and we should take any possible means to reduce those emissions. Perhaps the council has considered buying electric trucks.
Thanks, Helen. Take that on notice. On that one, any other community representations, gentlemen? No? Very good. Moving on to public question time. So questions with notice received from the public for this meeting are included in the agenda on page 13. And then we move to public questions without notice. We move into this part of the meeting. I'll get you to state your name, and you have 3 minutes to ask a maximum of 2 questions, and we will either answer or take them on notice. So I'll open up public question time. Somebody like to come forward? Yep, thank you. Yep.
Lee Wasserfall, really much. First question, has there been any update on the ABX planning application from the EPA or anything like that you can update us on, please?
Yes, there was, and I'm looking over at the Director of Development and Regulatory, but we asked for an update from the state government, the EPA, on their assessment process, and they were having a meeting in March, I believe, to consider the way that they are progressing with that. So hopefully we hear an update from the state government after they have had whatever meeting that would be, Lee. So unless, Krista, anything in addition to that? No.
Here's a second question. With regard to the motion that was passed at the AGM and that was discussed at last month's council meeting, one of the points raised is the council's response to that motion. One of the points raised was that it was agreed that the council recognises the value of community engagement. I just want to follow up on the community engagement can we expect some kind of engagement with proactive engagement as regards planning applications that the community is really interested in? For example, the ABX planning application. Is there anything beyond the statutory requirements that we can expect following on from that commitment to the value you place in community engagement? For example, that we might, those that have put in a representation, we could know when the actual decision from the EPA is made and council receives, and it's then that 42 days continues to run. Does that make sense? be proactive.
Yep.
Yep, I think I know what you mean, Lee. So I think that the applicant did their own level of consultation, and I know that they met with some members of the community. I know that that was probably not at the level that some members of the public thought was appropriate. We did receive a high level of representation for that application, so that's correct also. As a council, we don't have any planned consultation opportunities coming up relating to that application. It's not our standard practice to do so, but I guess depending on what the advice that we receive from the EPA is and what our planning assessment process looks like, we may do, but we haven't made a decision on that at this point in time. So I don't have a date to advise you. I don't have a commitment that we will be, but it's something that our officers will consider over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, I expect.
Could I just add to that, Lee, that I guess if you think there's things that council should potentially be looking at, I'd be interested for an email to come through for council to consider going forward. Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
Ian Kenzie, Marco Bracknell. Okay, my first question regarding that actually about community engagement. So it's around the landfill strategy, communication. I'll just read out. So, Chris, my question is regarding your recommendation to in landfill strategy communication required. So it says communication required. Communication, the prior service change with the community after the event. Given the accounts around the lack of communication, poor engagement and community backlash with the Northern Prison Precinct, I compare it to the Northern Prison Precinct because I believe ramifications of the decision will usually be detrimental and everlasting, dumping, burning of additional load and community bins. It's a huge decision to remove the service. My question being, when, where and how were the community engaged in the closure of the Westbury Waste facility prior to this recommendation being presented to council?
Happy to take that one, Macca, and the GM may follow up. I guess you have elected representatives that sit here around the table. We make decision on behalf of those that elected us. From my point of view, we have been looking at this item since 2018. We've looked at the strategy. We received a report last month, and we're looking at a proposal that's in the agenda today that is 4 months away. So there's some items that will come out of that potentially, and there will possibly be some change. That's my response. General Manager may respond something different.
Yeah, so that's right. Our council has been considering this item since February 2016 when our first waste strategy was adopted. There's been many sort of points in time where bits and pieces have been considered. There's been mail outs around considering extension of curbside collection areas as well, which included areas around Clough. So I guess the engagement has been over an extended period of time. Council reviewed and updated its waste strategy in August 2024 as well. Originally, the landfill area at Clough, that's almost at capacity to the EPA standard. Permit was due to close on the 1st of July 2024. So in the lead up to July 24, our council extended that to make best use of the airspace and that sort of thing. But we're obviously now reaching a point in time where, again, our estimates are that it's at capacity, and we have sought some advice from 2 consultants in the last 12 months around what the landfill future will be, particularly around the I guess the condition and the environmental condition of the Clough landfill. So there's a few good stage comments.
Yep.
My second question is a long-winded one, so I'll actually shorten it to another short one. So within that landfill strategy, it states the council will have the choice of 2 sites, sending it to Dalberton or Launceston, owning neither what controls does the Meander Valley Council have over these fees, charges or costs? And what guarantee or controls are in place to stop them being increased by 10, 20 or 30% or even 50 annually for the next 5 years?
Thanks, Macca. That's a good question because what capacity do we have? I guess if we looked at the Tasmanian government levy that's put on waste at the moment, that started at $20, it goes to 40. There is talk that it could go way higher than that, and that's a cost that we put straight back to council, and council unfortunately will share that amongst their residents and ratepayers as well. I guess if we look at Dalberton, and I'm talking here about the 4 councils that own the Dalberton site down there, they are certainly wanting more capacity to make their landfill more productive, I guess, for the want of a better word. Launceston again, most of the northern councils either send their waste to Launceston or to Dalberton at the moment. So I guess it's there's no guarantees that charges won't go up in that scenario, but there's no charges that if we maintained our landfills the way they are, and would have to go back to EPA to continue to ask for exemptions, permits to increase our capacity or Deloraine, that there will be certainly costs come with that. Yeah, sure.
Yep, and I also have a few comments, if that's okay, Macca. So this is a topic that our council has really struggled with over the course of 10 years. It's a very complex area. I guess you talk about control, you're talking about an area that's managed in accordance with environmental standards. The EPA standards have changed significantly over the last 10 years, but also over the last 30, 40 years of the life of our existing landfill areas. So our control that I guess our councils once thought they had around those areas has changed substantially. Cost of construction's increased significantly. The cost of other contractors that we use in the processing of that is increased significantly. The period of time that we need to manage our landfills after they are closed is increased. That's 30 years. That certainly wasn't 30 years when they were constructed. The management of leachate, which is the water that comes out of landfill, that's changed significantly over that period of time too. So I guess those are all things that our council probably thought at one point in time that they had a level of control, but they have since not. The comparison that our council has been doing recently is between whether it's viable for us to construct a new landfill area in Meander Valley if it were to be able to receive a permit from the state government, which isn't a given also, and comparing that against what the cost is to transport to a regional facility. So when we talk about what the gate fee is at a regional facility and what control we have, that'll be a contract negotiation. We may be able to contract in over a period of time, 5 years, 10 years perhaps, and maybe it's just an annual gate fee that we are a price taker in, which I think is your point. But we're comparing that against the cost of constructing a new landfill because our landfills are almost full. So we're thinking about what's the future for Meander Valley residents, and we have only a limited amount of control over that too. And we can see that as at today, best financial estimates for us is that it's going to be far more cost effective for us to transport to a regional facility than to try and construct our own landfill. So I guess that's the comparison that our councillors have been struggling with. So your point around locking in the cost of the contract, you're right. We will only be able to lock it in for a certain period of time, but there's also a greater level of uncertainty around constructing our own landfill if we were to be able to receive a permit.
Thanks. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Yep.
Hello, my name is Shannon Stieglitz. I live in Deloraine. My question today is why is the privacy of residents in multiple dwelling developments considered more important and valuable than their neighbours? Units must be 6 metres apart, but less than half that can happen to the neighbouring properties.
So I can take that one on notice. I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. So,
Well, I guess, Mayor, I guess the conditions will be set by the planning legislation that our planning applications are bound by, and that being the state planning scheme, the local the regional land use strategy and the local provisions for Meander Valley. So I guess that's what we are bound by, and there are various committed pathways and discretionary pathways as well that applicants need to abide by. So I guess us as a council, as a planning authority, we would need to consider and make sure we're making decisions in accordance with that legislation.
Regarding rubbish, Neil Scott, regarding rubbish, after reading the agenda, it sounds like there'll be only transfer station at Mile Creek, Deloraine and one at Meander. What about the other end of the municipality? Got any ideas what happens with rubbish there? Thanks.
At the moment, Neville, most of the rubbish and other in the municipality flows through the lawn system, as it currently does. So, yeah.
Well, I guess council has considered where the transfer stations are, what a reasonable travel distance are, where adjoining municipalities have transfer stations. So if I think about the Birrelly, Rosevale area and its proximity to Exeter transfer station, Longford transfer station as well. So we have it would be about 3 or 4 years ago now considered what a transfer station for Westbury could potentially look like as well. All of those things have been discussed at various council workshops since 2016. So, but yeah, as the Mayor said, we have a lot of 5,500 people in Foster Vale, 1,200 in Blackstone that would have access to a Deloraine transfer station, but may elect to go to the regional facility at Remount Road because it's closer to, I think, what the Mayor is indicating there. We provide tip tickets that can be redeemed at Remount Road also. But we also have a large area of our eastern catchment that have access to a curbside collection, which isn't necessarily the case for those that are in the western end of the municipality. So.
Thanks, Chair. Any other questions from the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both Tascott and Amplicare report that the numbers of homeless are rising. Would the General Manager please provide details of the steps that Meander Valley Council has taken to provide temporary or permanent accommodation for the homeless in Meander Valley?
I'll make a couple of comments. So I guess our council has probably discussed it twice in the last 6 months at workshop. We're not a provider of housing. There are state government responsibility. There are low cost housing providers that are active in this space. Our council is not, and I dare say that no council in Tasmania actually plays an active role in providing housing for those that are homeless or displaced. Obviously, it's really sad and disappointing to see those that are. We currently have one person that's homeless in our municipality. I guess from time to time we are made aware. We have talked about internally what our council processes are for managing people that are homeless and camping on our parks and reserves areas. So there are some things that we have discussed more recently, but we aren't a housing provider. We don't provide areas or housing for those that are homeless.
My second question, it looks as if we're losing the battle of physics against global heating. In the Northern Hemisphere, some countries, for example, Norway, Denmark and Finland, have issued their residents, all of them, with booklets that detail exactly what they will need to survive for 3 days in the event of a sudden catastrophe. Will the Meander Valley Council erect public notice boards with the details of public centres that will always accept people dislocated by sudden extreme climate or other emergencies? Because people need to know where to come before it happens and before authorities are overwhelmed. And secondly, consider the compilation of a booklet similar to those provided, for example, in Norway, to help people prepare for themselves in case of an emergency. And I provided to the General Manager the URLs for the emergency booklets for Norway and Denmark.
Thanks, Helen. I'll take that question on notice and we'll also put that on our workshop agenda going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on the floor? No? Okay, thank you for your questions. For those who asked questions today, could you email a written copy of your questions to ogm@nbc.tas.gov.au by morning, or you can hand your written questions to the staff. Thank you. Moving over to councillor question time, page 15. Councillor questions with notice. There was questions in the agenda. Moving on to councillor questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice from councillors? Councillor Dudman.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions. The first relates to the Economic Development Forum that was held on the 5th of February 2025 by Meander Valley Council. Could Council provide an update on the success of that event and explain what learnings and next steps will be taken as a response to it?
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. So I guess the success will be determined by those that were there, but I guess I attended and personally I found it a really good experience. We had 52 people that attended. That included the presenters on the day. So I was quite pleased to see the amount of people that came out to either share their experience as a business owner or somebody that works in the area and raise what's important to them moving forward. As far as what the process is from here, Councillor Dudman, the facilitators of the session was the Tas Policy Exchange, and they'll be producing a report of both their pre-work that they did. So they did some investigation before the day and produced a background paper, which was good. And they'll build upon that to produce a report for council of their findings.
Thank you. My second question is in relation to the article in the Examiner online from 9 February 2025 entitled Meander Valley Councillor calls for landmark to be named after Donald Trump. Following this article, great concern and angst has been expressed by my community regarding the proposal. During the January 2024 council meeting as background, Councillor Temple asked whether Meander Valley Council had an appetite to rename a suitable landmark in honour of US President Donald Trump. This follows similar suggestions put to council by Councillor Temple in 2016 and 2020. The matter, as documented in our council agenda today, was discussed at the January 2025 workshop. Mayor, for the benefit of the community who have expressed their concerns to me and my colleagues, can you advise to the outcome of the discussion in January 2025 workshop? Namely, was there any support for Councillor Temple's proposal amongst the other councillors present? What views were expressed by the other councillors on this subject? Will Meander Valley Council seek to name any landmark after the current or any president of the United States of America? And also, if there were proposals to name landmarks after any person, would the community first be consulted on the matter?
4 questions in one, councillor. No, there was no support around the table for Councillor Temple's motion at the workshop and what is now agenda today. I don't see that there'll be any support to name any part of Meander Valley after a foreign dignitary, as in a president of the United States. If there was a community group come forward that asked us to look at the renaming of a facility, then we would consider it. That would come from the community. Hopefully that answered all your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Loader.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, at the December 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, I asked a question regarding the traffic noise generated by trucks in the Meander Valley Road and Lonsdale Promenade area of Westbury. Has there been a response from State Growth about this matter, and if so, what was it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Loader. Council officers have discussed the issue with the Department of State Growth. They are supportive of some minor amendments to the signage to extend the braking distance out from Westbury, likely in the vicinity of around 100 metres or so. So we'll work through that process with the Department of State Growth.
Thank you very much. And I've got a second question too. Thank you. It has been brought to my attention that logging in the Wagina area is causing disruption to residents of the rural living zone. My understanding is that for rural living zones, there are restrictions on operation for industry, including commercial vehicle movements. Operating hours must be between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays and commercial vehicle movements between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. The resident is reporting that noise from harvesting is beginning at 5 a.m. and truck movements are commencing at 6 a.m. Calls to the forestry companies haven't been helpful. I am told that the resident has been in touch with council about this matter, and the resident reports that council was advised that the forestry operation was to cease 2 weeks ago, but it is continuing. I believe that this operation has also caused another delay to the scheduled roadworks in Dynams Bridge Road. My questions are, have council operations been delayed due to forestry operations in the area? And can council implement monitoring of the noise levels and operation times of forestry operations? And if they're not acceptable, place limitations and penalties for non-compliance?
That's about 3 questions in one too, Councillor. But anyway. Matthew? Try again. Look at that.
Thanks for your questions, Councillor. But I might take some of them. I noticed like the health and agenda. In relation, I'm aware of past history with some of the operation of their history. That wasn't, we received some concerns from residents. It was mainly around the road use and the noise generated by the cartage companies at the time operating was from Victoria window. At that time, the contractor company got pretty good to the council. We couldn't restrict them from using the road 24 hours a day. And the residents, and they reduced their operating times. I don't recall exactly what they were, but they reduced it to obviously support the end of the by residents. In relation to now, I'm not familiar across the detail with the concern. Certainly something that I'll pop up, and the other officers that I know well. From being able to restrict the operation, it's something that I will need to seek advice from environmental health officers and other department in the council to understand that. In relation to the roadworks, no, the forest operation was not delayed. Council did have a delay. It was dealing with some service relocations through other authorities. But we also were aware that there would be operations, forest operations up until about Christmas time. So we were proposing to recommence roadworks down there prior to Christmas. The primary delays were the service authority relocation of some of their network. So nothing to do with the forestry operation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Field.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The follow-up to the bauxite question does, for my benefit and maybe one or two others, does EPA normally advise, so when they've done their part of the assessment of an application that come before them because it's a level 2 activity, do they advise the representatives themselves, or is it simply returned to council to do, you know, if it gets approval from them? We know it's a different pathway if they reject it outright, but if they on their subset, as significant as it is, if they approve that part and it comes back to us, do they at that point advise the representatives of what their results, their outcome is, or is it just simply then come back to us and we continue on with our process and advise when we've done our part?
Good question. Yeah. We're looking for. Yep.
Through to Mayor Natasha Whiteley, Team Leader Town Planning. My understanding is that the EPA most likely will not advise representatives of the decision. So, however, we will need to confirm through the legislation and the processes what EPA's responsibilities are. Upon receipt of a decision from the EPA,
council will have 42 days to make our decision. When council are recommending that item to be taken to a council meeting, we will then notify all the representatives to that proposal, advising them of the council meeting and then letting them know that they are welcome to attend that meeting to listen to that deliberation and alternatively address councillors should they wish. So,
Councillor.
Thank you. Separate question. Recently, the local government board made some findings into the operation of Dorset Council. I was wondering whether has council had time to read the actual finding document, as lengthy as it is, and are there any learnings relevant to our operations in an ongoing basis? I noticed a couple of them seem to be relevant in terms of the comments on operational matters and planning, assessment and approvals, the two things that jumped out at me. So I was wondering whether General Manager perhaps in particular may have a comment, or yourself?
Yeah, so I haven't read the report in full, councillor. I guess that would be up to each individual councillor whether they took it upon themselves to read that report or not. Yeah, there's probably some learnings in it, but that would be for each individual councillor. There's nothing that we would be telling councillors about and whatever say, and I don't think we've received any directorates from the Department of Local Government to do that. So, can I imagine?
No, that's right, Mayor. We have not received any advice from the state government of, I guess, things that have come out that are a sector-wide change or anything for our council to look at. So that's correct. I think Councillor Sinfield, it might be worthwhile having a workshop item in the next 2 months for us as a council to talk about that. I think there's probably some policy position that they would recommend either as shortcomings in the council of the day at Dorset or improvement opportunities that we can look at for additional policies here at our council. So perhaps that's an area that we could consider.
Very good. Any other questions, councillors? If there is no, right, we must have to council notices of motion. Any notice of motion, councillors? If there is no, over the page. Okay, we're moving into planning authority reports. So, in planning matters, council acts as a planning authority under Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. The following applies. So we look at strategy, policy, legislation, consultation, budget and finance, risk management and alternative motions. And I have to leave the building.
So as the Mayor's declared interest, he's left the room, which means that our Deputy Mayor, Cameron, will assume the chair.
Page 18 for those following along. And while I just get my computer ready. So moving into Planning Authority 25/0065, 30A West Broderick Street, Deloraine. Is there any speakers in the gallery for this item? So I'll just start my timer for 3 minutes and I'll ring it for you at 2 minutes 30 seconds. So just when you're ready.
Deputy Mayor, General Manager and councillors, my name is Janice Douglas. I live in my dream home, St Andrew's Church at 32 West Goderich Street, Deloraine. It's an absolutely beautiful heritage listed building built in 1883. I respectfully come here today to object to a proposed multiple dwelling development by Woolcott Land Services at 38 West Goderich Street. The developer wants to place 3 low-budget kit homes directly adjacent to St Andrews, with 1.5 metres from my family. We did not give adequately speak on this matter in the allotted 3 minutes, but I will try. The proposed development is contrary to the Meander Valley Council Planning Code 8.1.3, as it would cause unreasonable loss of amenity through scale, intensity, noise and activity outside of visitor hours. If you approve this unsightly development as is, you would be permanently degrading my amenity and that of my neighbour who owns the former Presbyterian manse circa 1898. By ignoring the obvious significance and heritage values of the West Deloraine precinct, you would be acting against at least 3 of the policy recommendations of the Meander Valley Heritage Study Report Council commissioned. By taking away my privacy and erasing the sweeping views of the Great Western Tiers, the value of my property is diminished. A site visit was made by MPC planning staff, but concerns outlined in our representations have not been addressed, especially from a privacy perspective. I strongly disagree that there will be minimum loss of privacy. Based on the floor and deck height directly outside my living room and bedroom, I would be stripped of virtually all privacy. This loss cannot be mitigated by the block-out blinds or curtains already installed unless they are kept permanently closed and are living in the garden like a mushroom. I would have the unwelcome intrusion of shift workers coming and going late at night and early in the morning, not permanent residents, but short to medium term workers on night shift. No earthworks are being conducted to level the site and reduce the impact. In fact, the huts are being placed on stilts. Privacy modification by way of a screen has been requested by NBC between the units themselves, but not a single option has been recommended for my privacy. It seems the developer and their tenants get more consideration than me and my heritage listed building. The Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, 1B is to provide for the fair, orderly and sustainable use of development land. The objectives established by the include G, to conserve those buildings, areas or other places which are of aesthetic, architectural or historical interest or otherwise of special cultural value. This development application is not fair, nor does it take into consideration the aesthetic or historical interest of neighbouring properties or the precinct. I am for sustainable development. I'm acutely aware of the lack of temporary accommodation in the region. No one from Walcott or Canberra have approached us to negotiate a solution, which of course would have been welcomed prior to heading there, here and then down the Tascat route. Council may approve an application with amended conditions or may refuse an application altogether. I sincerely request that you refuse this application in its current state.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this topic? We got it. Is it Helen? Yeah. So,
Councillors, I was interested in this application from the point of view of looking at it objectively, as the previous speaker has said, that the whole construction is on stilts, and that takes off a metre of site. So why hasn't the solution of actually excavating a metre or more down to put the building height in a position where it didn't affect the amenity of both those buildings quite so much?
thanks, Helen. So if there's no other speakers for that topic, I'll just call for a mover and seconder. Councillor Dudman is the mover. Is there a seconder? Let's look at you, Councillor. Thank you. So as the mover of the motion, Councillor Dudman, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to the two representatives as well, especially to you, Ms. Seedless. I'm aware that this is a very big issue for you as a direct neighbour. From the report and from the representations we've received, there's obviously 3 core issues, that being amenity, largely the views that this development will obstruct, the privacy and the heritage. Unfortunately, in terms of amenity and privacy, it is under the planning scheme a very tight scope, and more generally in Australian law, privacy is not a right that anyone inherently has, nor is there a right to views. And I say that because when we are basing an argument of whether to approve or to reject something on these claims, we need to make sure that as a council, if we were to reject it, there would be a sufficient argument, a defendable argument, legal argument, to take to the appeals tribunal in the event that it was appealed. And I don't see that in this instance. In terms of heritage as well, I do appreciate the reference to the heritage study report. Unfortunately, currently under our planning scheme, we do not have a heritage overlay for Deloraine, and that is an issue that we have spoken about in council before. It is something that we're working on across the towns like Carrick, Westbury, and I am certainly will get to Deloraine as well. It's something that I would appreciate. Unfortunately, in the interim, despite our best endeavours, unless it is written today, we can't apply something that is we hope to do in the future to a decision we're making today. The heritage argument is one that we can improve in the future. Unfortunately, in terms of privacy and amenity, that is more largely a state government area that I realistically don't see them changing too greatly under our planning scheme. But that is the crux of the issues that we're facing here today, and it is for those reasons that I will be supporting the application. In referring to, I think it's important to note the reference to 8.1.3 under the planner's assessments. It does say under discretionary uses that the proposed development, and I'm quoting from page 52, is associated and a subservient part of the existing aged care facility as it provides for staff accommodation. According to clause 6.2.2, the proposal is therefore required to be classified into the same use class. The residential use class provides for residential use within self-contained or shared accommodation. Important to the assessment under table 8.2 is that the existing and proposed development cannot be identified as single dwelling. The relevant use class for the proposed development is therefore permitted, and that makes 8.3.1 not applicable for these purposes. And to Ms. about the excavation, it might be worth a question once we go into general debate after the opening statements, but my understanding is that excavation of the nature that would be required is unreasonable as well. Just briefly, I'll return to privacy in talking about that being the slither of discretion that we have on this one. The privacy element that is in breach there refers to Unit 1, where there is a section of about 30 to 40 centimetres in width on the deck that is 8 centimetres above the ideal or the acceptable solution. So the resolution, in my mind, the best we could obtain is a small 30 to 40 centimetre screen to resolve that minor breach, which in my view is fairly de minimis, and I don't think the representatives would appreciate that as a solution because it doesn't really do anything. So on that basis, I've tried to explain point by point why I'm making my decision. It is one that is based on the application of the planning scheme, which is imperfect. But I don't believe there are sufficient grounds to reject this application. And I do feel for the community that does cherish heritage values and the way that new developments apply next to older developments. But I can't justify rejecting this on what is some fairly limited and minor discretions that wouldn't get an argument past the first point. So that is my views there in a very manner.
Assessment.
Thank you.
Can Councillor Loader remember what she was going to say?
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dudman. You have basically summed it all up very well. I, as always, take being on the planning authority here for Meander Valley very seriously. This particular application doesn't sit well with me. It's going to be corrugated iron cladding, I believe, which is an interesting choice, but not part of the planning scheme. We can't say anything about that, can we? No. It's just really unfortunate that the Act says that this is allowed, and this is where we need to get in and make sure we see the Act changed to be something that the community wants it to be, because the Act says this is allowed. So as a planning authority, we've got no choice but to approve it and let you take it to TASCAP if that's what you want to do. or are able to do, because let's face it, that doing these things is a huge drain on us emotionally, mentally and financially. So I really don't want to approve this. I really don't. But then at the same time, I do, because we need temporary accommodation. We really do. And we had a discussion before in the pre-meeting about people coming and going in shift work. Well, anybody who lives next door to me would really wonder what the hell my husband does, because he comes and goes at all hours of the night because he works on dairy farms, and sometimes he goes out at 11 o'clock at night to check on the cows. So who knows what people think he actually does, those few people who don't know us. But that's not really a consideration either. We have someone close to us who goes to work at 5 o'clock in the morning on his motorbike, and I think that's great because he's got a job and he's going off to work, so that's good. So what if my sleep's disturbed? So I guess we've just got to live in a community and take those sort of things as they come and be kind and understanding. Back to the whole the density and the loss of privacy, I'm not going to say any more because Councillor Dudman has said everything. I will say again, the corrugated iron cladding, yeah, it's not going to look pretty.
Thanks, Councillor Loader. Now, does anyone else around the table would like to have a comment? Councillor Temple?
Thank you, Acting or Deputy Mayor. To me, it looks, the cheapest possible temporary quick fix. So I'm wondering, is it just temporary while they've got the staff issues that they have, and it's all going to be taken away, or is this likely to be there for the next 50 years? I don't suppose we have an answer to that, but I can't think of a way it could have been done cheaper.
Would you like to?
Well, the cost of the build and the cladding isn't really part of the assessment that we have before you today, Councillor Temple, unless the planning professionals like to add anything further.
So just to reiterate that, is this, it looks, in WA you would have dongers on mining sites and so forth. It's very close to being those.
Yeah.
So I'd ask again, is this intended to be permanent, or is it just a temporary quick fix and it'll be gone in a year or two?
Well, Councillor, it's not a temporary permit, it's a permanent permit that'll sit on the property title. So there's no restrictions that council is putting in place by way of a condition for it to be temporary in any way. So I think that probably is the answer for your question.
Is there any other questions around the table? Councillor Sinfield?
Yes. Earlier today there was some discussion about the possibility that maybe the proponent might voluntarily lower the buildings and put them into the ground or whatever, and not up on stilts or some of it, and hence change the vista somewhat, and that would be up to them, and that perhaps we may consider that not as being a significant change from an application point of view, and hence not require a new permit. So I was wondering if we could get a comment on that possibility.
Thank you.
So not altering what we're approving, but perhaps altering the outcome.
Thank you. I'll just refer to the General Manager before I move to the planning stuff. Do you have a comment?
Yeah. Councillor Cinco is the second councillor that has made that suggestion today. So I guess the lowering the site. I think from a planning perspective, we won't ask the planners to provide a comment because they've done the assessment and it doesn't form part of the assessment, doesn't form part of the permit conditions or permit notes. But what I may do, Councillor Sinfield, is ask the Director of Development Regulatory Service to write to the applicant for them to consider that outside of our role as a planning authority.
Well, I guess the comment is is that in fact a possibility from a planning point of view, the fact that it may not trigger a new application. So a bit like being inside the building envelope, you're even more inside the building envelope if you like.
For you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, if the developer reviews the plans, if approved today, and choose to want to alter how the dwellings are placed on the site, whether it be that they want to try and lower it and undertake some excavation. If the development is not increasing in height, if it's not getting any larger in terms of its footprint, if it's not going closer to any boundaries, it may be possible that it would be something that is considered substantially in accordance with the approved document. Again, should it be approved today or subject to an approval process further on. However, that would be up for the developer to consider. Thanks.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, again, thank you to the representatives that have raised some very valid points and very heartfelt points too. I'd also like to take the opportunity of thanking planning staff. As always, they do a lot of work in behind the scenes to prepare the documentation for us to consider. I guess I asked myself 4 questions when I looked at this. First of all, am I excited by the proposed units? Not particularly. Do I find the units attractive in their current form? No, not really. Thirdly, do I see the need? Well, certainly, yes, I do. I think the community benefit is huge. It's already been spoken about, and Councillors Studman and Logue, I think, alliterated that very well. There is enormous need for that facility. And I guess it's an opportunity to say, really, also to thank Aged Care Deloraine for the work that they do in the community. It goes without saying that we'd be lost without them. And we have an ageing demographic, and their level of care is outstanding, including my mum in days gone by. But the overriding consideration, notwithstanding all that, is the proposal compliant with the planning scheme overall? It's been outlined that it is, and that needs to be the basis of my decision. If there are some things that can be done to sort of ease any stress on the immediate neighbours with what we spoke about, that would be great. But I will be supporting the motion on the basis that it does largely conform to the planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor House. Is anyone else? Councillor Sinfield?
A question and then a comment. The planning scheme says that a change of use within the same use class doesn't require, it does require a permit unless the planning scheme specifically says otherwise. Given that we're doing this as accommodation ancillary to my work, but ancillary to the overall use of the site, is there anything about that would then prevent or make difficult in any way, shape or form these 3 buildings being used for, private accommodation? Somebody, so currently the proposal is that they be for staff working on site. Is there anything that would make it difficult? Because if you said that's been done in this manner, that maybe they over there for staff accommodation, that they might be moved on, would it be an easy planning pathway for them to be considered in the future as dwellings in their own right?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. As Councillor Sinfield has indicated, these multiple dwellings have been considered as staff accommodation for the purpose of Aged Care Deloraine and their staff. If in the future they will look to be rented out, perhaps in for people who are not subservient or ancillary to the Aged Care Deloraine, we would be needing to consider that against the planning scheme. One of those changes of use, as Councillor Sinfield has indicated, would be considered. However, in saying that, under the use class table of the planning scheme, multiple dwellings is a permitted use, as is residential. So whether it be aged care facility, multiple dwellings, or another type of residential use, if it's not a single dwelling, it would be a permitted application, providing the components of the planning scheme are met. So whilst it might need to be assessed for a potential change of use in the future, it would likely still be similar type of outcome in terms of its use table under the planning scheme.
Thank you.
And my comment.
Yes, mate. Wrap it up.
I think the representative spoke incredibly eloquently, and I feel really sorry because I know how this is likely to go. And a mea culpa, in a sense, this is down to me. In no small measure, is that I first got involved in council matters probably 17, 18 years ago, off the back of receiving a 20-page document telling me what a B grade heritage listing would do to my place, which infuriated hundreds of other people throughout the municipality. The short version of my answer is that as a consequence of that, council moved away from having a B grade list, and the upshot of that is that in our previous interim scheme we ended up with no heritage precincts or anything else which we might have transferred into the current scheme. So, and there's been a huge hesitancy in a sense to go down that path, and it's been very hard to overcome that inertia, so I apologise personally that we don't have heritage precincts, and a lot of the things that you're addressing may well have had a very different outcome had we had those. So I'm genuinely sorry for that. Yeah, the way forward is to redress that issue, and I think we're being rather slow on the uptake in trying to do that. So I apologise. Say more, but
Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. So any further comment before I move on? I guess I do want to just thank my fellow councillors for the discussion today. Understand the position that we're in, and thank the representatives for coming along. Planning is very difficult, particularly for people that it affects next door. So we do understand, and so thank you very much for coming along today. But with that, I will put it to the vote and call. Oh, I need to go back to Anne-Marie, who was, sorry, Anne-Marie, I must have felt like the preamble from Councillor Dudman was so long that I forgot to go back to you, so I do apologise. So Councillor Dudman's going to make me pay for that comment, so thanks, Anne-Marie.
No worries, Deputy Mayor, thank you. I just want to note Councillor Sinfield's heartfelt comment just then. I really felt the emotion in there. Somebody literally had a go at me a couple of nights ago, in fact, about the fact that I'd been on council for 2 years and why haven't I done something about LUPA, the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. And it really hit home that we do sit around this table and we could be doing something to improve this situation. Having said that, most of us juggle jobs and a million other things, but that's no excuse. No one had a gun at our head to stand for council. So I do think we need to do something about that. It's not going to help this particular case, unfortunately, because it meets the Act, so we have to approve it, which is just, well, that's all I'll say.
Well done. Thanks, Councillor Loader. And thank you, Councillor Dudman, for your
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I know you're so happy to hear from you. I was going to make a smart comment directed in your way, but I think I'll actually refer to two previous comments there in terms of what are we doing to deal with changes to our planning scheme, and I got that criticism too. I had some recent comments in Carrick that were not so nice about the issues that we face in applying planning scheme and why there aren't forthcoming changes. I think there's some important things to note there as well. But we don't just sit idle. We've only just been able to attract a strategic planner into our workforce, which has been a role that's sat vacant for so long because they're so hard to get. It's a highly qualified position, and that is what we need to be able to transform some of the changes we're talking about, and we are now doing that through Carrick We've had meetings, Councillor Lake, Councillor Temple and I have met on the village green with residents about a heritage overlay in Westbury, and we will have conversations as well about the Deloraine one. It's also important to note that the state government has to approve whatever changes we want to make too. So we can go through the motions, and unfortunately it does take time to develop these changes, but we are also reliant upon a higher level of government that we are entitled to step into in order to make the changes we want to see. So it is a complex issue. It is one that a lot of people don't care to discuss. They want the simple answer of why can't you fix this for me? And unfortunately, council is not a black and white place. I really wish it was. It would make life so much easier. But I think you've seen the passion in which we talk about our community today and the issues that we're facing when we make decisions like these. We don't take it lightly. We aren't ignorant to the views that are being shared, and we will always do our best to improve our community and make sure that we are respecting the heritage areas that we so greatly need to cherish from both a historical point of view and also a tourism point of view and a local community point of view. And that is something we will all keep working towards.
Thank you. Okay, so now I am back to the bit that I jumped the gun on. So all those in favour, please say aye and raise your hands. So Cameron, Conshaw, Dudman, Smedley, Loader and House, and those against? Temple and Councillor Sinfield abstaining. Thank you. The motion's carried passed. I will now adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow the mayor to come back inside. If there's anybody that wants to leave now after that discussion, that they may do so now.
Welcome back, councillors. We will continue on. We've moved out of acting as planning authority and we're looking at infrastructure services 13.1, which is on page 117. So can I have somebody like to move, somebody like to second that? Councillor House, thank you. Seconder? Sure. Councillor
Tadman was going.
You said sure, so. Councillor House has moved the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It seems pretty straightforward to me. I see no reason why this policy should not be retained. It appears to have been rarely applied, but nothing in it appears redundant, so I support it continuing.
Thank you. Councillor Dudman.
I'll also refrain from making a long-winded statement. It's a simple policy and continuance, and there is no grounds to knock it back, as Councillor House said.
Thank you. Open up for discussion, councillors. Any discussion? No discussion? Very good. Anything to add from the second of the motion?
Not from that.
Nothing to add, Mr Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye, and against. All right, that's carried unanimous. Thank you. I'm just going to get my paperwork right because I've written it in the wrong spot. Moving on to infrastructure services 13.2, which is page 125. Someone like to move, someone like second, please. Councillor Cameron, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Dudman, thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. Yes, this does happen from time to time, where things change throughout the year from a budget. I do believe that maybe there's a few extra zeros on the end of some numbers here compared to what we might be used to, but a good outline of how we've come to this is included in the document. So thank you to Dave and the team for doing this juggle so that we can see some of these projects finished. So appreciate your help.
That's Councillor Dudman, second.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I think it's important to note that we're not going backwards here. We are receiving some extra funding and ensuring that the projects that we have underway will be achieved if they aren't close to being already. So that's something I'm happy to support.
General Manager, make a comment.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask the mover and the seconder if they are accepting of a minor change to the item. Local Government Act reference is 82.4. I've just picked up that we're asking for no overall change. So with the section 82.5 as the total amount of the estimates not altered. So if the mover and seconder are happy with that change, we'll make that for the purpose of the item.
We're changing a section to the right one.
The right one.
Yeah. Yes. That's
Happy?
Very happy we are. Very happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Continuing on, open up for discussion, councillors. Councillor Field.
Yeah, just because I've had a representation over this by somebody who read the agenda and was quizzical about the third dot point, I think it is, on page 126, regarding the new public toilets require additional funding of 50 grand to actually would appear to connect them to Taswater's water main and sewerage, and I suppose adding in a comment, I hope that's a bit not like getting two brand new ferries at the state level with no wharf to tie up to. Were we planning on building a toilet block that didn't connect to the sewer and water system, or is it just how it's worded there? As I say, I did have a representation over it, so I said I would ask.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Sinfield, and through the chair. The complication with this site was that it spans multiple titles. To be able to get the services to the toilet facilities, we actually need to extend other service mains to that point. So we can't do our servicing through another property. So it's that multiple title issue that's caught us out on this one.
So they were our titles, the multiple title?
That's correct.
Next, Councillor Kemp. General Manager.
Where the public toilets would be constructed is a title that is entirely in council's name, from memory, but the adjoining title is has a part of it. So solid.
It's that issue of Alston Drive then.
Unfortunately, so.
Okay. Councillor Tennant.
I was just going to ask Mr Mayor, would it be cheaper to have them on a septic system? And would that work?
So through you, Mr Mayor, the Director of Infrastructure may correct me here, but I'm quite confident that it's a serviced area and not an optional serviced area, so we don't have the ability to elect to fibre into the septic system.
For that.
Any other discussion, councillor Loader?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to say, I think it's really important to have this before us today so that the community can see exactly what grants are coming in and how that we're spending them. Yes, accountability and transparency is so important.
Thanks, councillor. Any other discussion, councillors? Might take the opportunity to talk about the first one, which was the council received a grant commitment of 20,000 from the Tasmanian State Government, which was directed to the Dragon Boat Racing Team Deloraine Flame. $20,000 to potentially go towards building a jetty pontoon for them to launch. That was a commitment made by the local member 2 elections ago from memory. And it's been sitting there, and the $20,000 will potentially go towards a design of a pontoon at this stage. So one of those issues where money can be given to community groups and then it's up to council to try and build a facility or do something with it that we had no input into at the time. So I'll raise that for the public interest. Any other thing to talk about, councillors? Any discussions? If not, councillor Dudman has seconded, I think. Councillor Kane. Move the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Against? That is unanimous. Thank you. Excuse me, I'll turn page. So page 129, expansion of FOGO site services to Carrick. Somebody like to move? Councillor Dudman, Councillor House. Councillor Dudman has moved the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, more than happy to move this motion expanding our FOGO food organic garden organics. Should have just stuck with the acronym. FOGO system across to the heading across the western end of the municipality. Obviously, there is a plan. This has been talked about a lot in the community. A desire to have FOGO. It is something that a lot of councils are picking up across the state, and it does improve upon the way we are managing waste. I think the survey results we got back from Carrick also points to, by and large, people do want this service, so it's good that we're delivering it. My understanding is that we will continue surveying communities for rollout of FOGO heading towards 2029. So we are not stopping at Carrick. We are going to continue the path forward. This is an important step in making sure that Carrick can join up with the services that other suburbs receive to the east of the municipality. So more than happy to endorse this exciting move in our waste management.
Thanks, Councillor Dudman. Councillor House, second on the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, well, Councillor Dudman. And perhaps further than that, I am a FOGO fan. I think I'm one of the only 2 councillors here at the moment that have FOGO. I might be corrected on that, but certainly others in the room have a FOGO service. I can only attest to how I've found the service. And that is, I mean, I used to make numerous trips to, I know we're going to be talking about landfill later, but I've made dozens of trips over the years to Remart Road with trail loads of green waste and so forth. I haven't made one in the last 2 or 3 years that I'm aware of. We use the FOGO bins all the time. And I just find it enormously successful and enormously useful. So I think sometimes, you know, the only thing to fear is fear itself. Sometimes change is a bit, you know, change is difficult, change is challenging. But I can only relate to how we've found it, and everyone that I know. I've got a son in Hadspen, he finds it the same way. So I agree that I think it's really important to roll it out across the community. And look, if I can, I was just going to quote just for reference on the page, because I think it's important to sort of make this point on page 134. When organic waste ends up in the landfill, it decomposes without oxygen, creating methane, a harmful greenhouse gas. Methane is 28 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. FOGO makes it easy for us to make a positive impact on our environment. And goes on to say with the FOGO bins, you can sustainably dispose of organic waste, reducing the amount sent to landfill. And I know we'll be talking more about landfill after. I think that's incredibly important to make that point. That's really that's one of our main objectives. So I am fully in support.
Thanks, councillor House. Open up for councillor Cameron.
Thank you. We've talked about FOGO a lot actually, and I think Councillor House winked at me when he said he was a FOGO fan, because he might know that I'm not the biggest fan. And that really is because of the removal of weekly rubbish collection. I've got nothing against FOGO at all. I actually quite like the idea of it and do understand the need for it in urban areas. I am a little bit concerned that we might be creeping the service too far away from those urban areas, and I do wonder, are we driving a truck around to pick up FOGO that won't necessarily have anything in the bin because they've all chucked their food scraps to the chooks. But in saying that, I am a reluctant supporter to Carrick. I would probably not be as excited about it if it crept further, and I am pleased that we have committed to make sure we survey those residents going into the future. So look, I would have preferred more people respond to the survey we sent to Carrick. I would have really loved to have been able to confidently come in here today and say, this is really clear directive. So if you do get a survey from council in the future, please fill it out. I cannot stress that enough because it is a little bit difficult afterwards. So yes, reluctant supporter, mostly because I'm concerned about what people with a family of young children are going to do with their nappies. But remember, you can get a bigger bin if you need it. So please, hopefully this works out for you and you will be as excited as Councillor House is about your FOGO in the future.
Thanks, councillor Cameron. Councillor Loder.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. I hear what you're saying. It would have been great if there were more people who had filled in the survey, but regardless, there is a clear mandate that Carrick generally would like a FOGO. I think the very first email I ever received as a councillor was from someone in Carrick wanting a FOGO. I'll have to go back and send her an email.
I know.
Yes, because her white dog's paws were going green because she had nowhere to put her grass clippings. So for her, this is a big win, but also it's a great big win for the environment. 40 to 60% of landfill is stuff that can go into a FOGO. Now, I don't know if you know, but if you put a lettuce into landfill, it takes 25 years to decompose, which is insane. So if we put stuff in, I know it's true. If we put stuff into FOGO, it means we are creating something that can be used. And if it goes to Dalberton, it'll be probably come back here as composted material to go on different farms and things. I think it's a real win. I can't wait to see it rolled out to the entire municipality, because ultimately what we need to do is reduce, reuse and recycle to get rid of this terrible problem we've got with managing waste. So yay for FOGO. I'm also a FOGO fan. I can't wait to have a bin with a green lid in Westbury.
I'm just going to let that sink in for the Western residents. That's all right. Open up for discussion, councillors. Councillor Temple.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have liked to see the questionnaire being a qualitative questionnaire or survey, because what we don't know is if those votes against were diametrically opposed and those votes for, for instance, were just mildly for. And I'll throw it around the other way, just as a question for future reference, not affecting today's decision. But if those votes had been the other way around, where we had 62 in favour and 91 against, would that be where FOGO would have stopped for Carrick, or would we have still be looking at going ahead?
In the past, councillor, when we've asked residents in other areas of the municipality, and we talked about Whitemore and other places, we've asked questions, do they want it? When they've come back and said they don't want it, we have not rolled it out.
Thank you.
Can I just also add that we're probably one of the only municipalities in the north or the northwest that doesn't have bin collection for all of our residents and ratepayers, all of our land owners, and we don't have FOGO rolled out right across the municipality. Daniel, sorry, Councillor Smedley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a supporter of the FOGO. of Prospect Vale, so we've received that in the last couple of years, and despite some initial reluctance and some feedback, I've heard nothing further since it's been rolled out. I think it's been a success in Prospect Vale. I know we've moved to fortnightly collections as well for the other general waste, and that hasn't posed too many issues. I haven't seen any issues around the streets in respect of that type of waste finding its way to the streets, those types of things. So that's been really positive. I've taken Councillor Temple's point until statistics and lies and things like that. But we could argue that less than 21% of the people are opposed to the FOGO in Carrick, because that's the number of votes that were returned in opposition. So we could look at it in that way as well. But those who didn't vote obviously didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other, and hopefully they adopt it and embrace it as well and can achieve the outcomes that Councillor Lowe has mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Smedley. Yeah, good. Any other discussions, Councillor Sinfield?
Yes, a couple of points. I am somewhat a FOGO fan, but I think there's been some recent commentary. Need to be careful how I get down this path about the possibility that going forward, and maybe that view has very recently changed, of not surveying the other towns that have a collection service, and we will simply implement a FOGO provision. So if we can get a comment on whether that sort of change in attitude is likely to now be the prevailing attitude. The other thing is a comment on Councillor Temple in the survey is I would have liked if you're going to do a survey, then make it more robust without it being asking, war and peace questions. In that I would have liked to have known, for example, whether the predominance of those who, or if there's any correlation between the people who are in the village part of Carrick versus those further out, and especially those in Charlie's Lane area, were more pro or against, and hence the necessity for where we might have done FOGO. For example, those in Charlie's Lane are on significantly larger blocks and may well be dealing with their, Councillor Cameron said, Deputy Mayor said, feeding to the chooks, etc. And also there are significant differences between us and Launceston City Council, for example, in that they have a weekly rubbish collection as well as FOGO, etc., versus our fortnightly. We've gone from, gone to an extra bin, but we've reduced the frequency of the service, whereas other councils are managing to have, you can go to councils on the mainland where they have half a dozen bins very frequently. So I perhaps wouldn't like to see us go to a model that says we're going to roll FOGO out to Deloraine and Chudley and Meander and wherever, and but we're not going to ask you first up.
So through there, just a couple of comments that Councillor Sinfield has asked there. I might just cover off on that last point first. Sorry to do it in a roundabout way. The City of Launceston, they have a green service. You pay an upfront fee, and those costs are met by the general rate. West Tamar Council, it's an opt-in service, and they pay an extra service fee for an additional green bin. There was another council recently I read about that has done it the way that we have, which is going backwards in garbage fortnightly and introducing a FOGO service, but we're not alone. There, my personal opinion is from a financial perspective, cost to the consumer, and in trying to encourage waste minimisation, the fact that our garbage bins, from the information from Circular North, our regional group, is that 50% of the garbage bin is FOGO matter anyway. So in theory, it is like the same waste, just in a different bin. So I'm personally very comfortable with the way that our council has elected to roll it out previously. So that's that one. We had a workshop discussion about this, councillor, a couple of weeks ago, and the guidance that we received was that there is a preference to survey when we are investigating future rollouts within our curbside collection area. So we don't have a next township identified that we're going to, but that will occur, and I think we're all expecting that we'll be doing a survey. So that's, I think, was one of the other points. The comment around Charlie's Lane, well, look, there's we need to consider where the collection route is, because I guess there's an economy of scale about trying to get a number of people in for it to make it not cost prohibitive. Or no price shock for the existing customers with bringing more online. So there is that. And with the survey, you comment around having more quantitative commentary, I suppose. We also need to make it easy for people to complete a survey and return it as well. So we need to, there's a bit of balance there, something that we need to bear in mind, because I guess we've had a couple of councillors already identified that would like to have seen more responses, and I guess, yeah, ideally we have 100% response rate, but we also need to be conscious that we need to make it easy for people to give us their opinion also.
So, Meander. Any other discussion, councillors? I think that no. Right. So, councillor House is the second of the motion.
No, I think there's nothing further to it. Thank you.
Councillor Dudley, move the motion.
Just a couple of points in conclusion. I think in debating the quality of the survey, the answer that we're looking for is quite black and white, in that we either expand the service or don't. So therefore, a yes or a no question, do you want it or not, is sufficient. And doing a broad scale, do you somewhat want it, do you not want it, do you not care, on a sliding scale is still going to at some point have to be cut down the middle with a yes or a no, which will give us the same answer. So I guess the point that I would make is we're not you can shake my head, your head, but that is certainly what the case is. And I think the point that I'm making here is that we're not the Bureau of Statistics. We don't need to confuse people. We just need a simple answer to what is, generally speaking, a simple question. But with regard to the expansion of the service, I think it's great that we've got FOGO. Great, geez, sorry. I think it is great that we have FOGO fans. I don't know why FOGO is such an issue for me to say, but it's great that we have FOGO fans around the table here. It's a good expansion. It's bringing us up in line with other areas of the Tasmanian community and Tasmanian councils. And on that basis, I think Anne-Marie puts it best, Deputy Mayor, if you don't want to do it for yourself, at least do it for the lettuce. So I'll leave it there.
And on that, no, we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. The lettuce would have been eaten at Councillor Cameron's farm, so it wouldn't have gone into that. That's
My chooks and my.
moving along to governance and community wellbeing, 14.1, page 139, declaration of office, Councillor Christine Cronshaw. Councillor Cameron, second, Councillor Loader, thank you. And Councillor Cameron has moved the motion.
Thank you. Yeah, really happy to support this. Welcome Chris to the council table. I think I first met her in about 2018 doing some really, really scary, whatever they're called, things, one that Macca organised at Bracknell, which was petrifying for us newbies. So, and look where we are now. So I think you will be a great asset to the table. So congratulations and welcome.
Councillor Loader.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, welcome, Councillor Cronshaw. It's lovely to have you around the table. I hope you enjoy the challenging experience that is being a representative of the community, and yes, welcome.
You open up for discussion, councillors, if there needs to be any. If not, they are actually on their best behaviour today, councillor, just to let you know, so.
It's downhill from here.
She can't run now.
I'm in the middle of these two. You are. Rose between the thorns. Anyway,
Between the cousins.
anyway, anything else, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's unanimous. Thank you. Governance Community Wellbeing, page 142, landfill strategy. Somebody like to move, somebody like to second. Councillor Dudman was up, Councillor House as a seconder. Councillor Dudman has moved the motion. 142, I think I said that. Start again. Yep.
Look, thank you, Mayor. I understand that this is causing a bit of debate within the community. This is something that we have been dealing with the entire time I've been on council, before that, the entire time you've been on council, and even longer before that. The fact is, we've known that Cluin is reaching capacity, and really, I guess effectively, it's probably beyond that point. We didn't think we'd get this far with it. In terms of the debates we've had about turning it into a waste transfer station, or creating a new cell, or creating a new tip as a whole, I, during my time here with others, pushed for a hard look at the feasibility of creating a new tip, which we have done here. And I would be more than happy to go down that path if it was financially feasible. And that's the issue that we've got here. It is not. And when we look at the life cycle expense and the variation there, it's $171 million. $171 million is an insane amount in terms of the variation when we look at what the alternative could be. And I take as part of that, I have discussed as recently as on Monday with the General Manager, the option to turn Westbury into Cluin into a transfer station, and the costs as well are there. And on that basis, I cannot sign us up to an extra $171 million in debt, however we're meant to secure that amount of debt in this process. A couple of points I'll make in terms of the concerns about the commercial viability of Dalverton and Launceston. I think there's a couple of points to make. One, that Dalverton is managed and owned by 4 councils who have the same vested interest as us in keeping services at a reasonable rate. And the other is that they compete against each other. So there is that commercial competition there to keep prices at a reasonable rate. But if we pretend for a moment that it didn't, and that instead they worked as a duopoly and raised the prices through the roof against obviously what they can legally do under the ACCC rules and regulations, if we pretend that they just ramped up the price, even if they did that, I can't see it being any more expensive than the $171 million variation that we're looking at here. Like, the price that they'd have to raise things up to get to that point is just insane. So I do appreciate the concern. And as I said, I was a key supporter of analysing a new landfill station. But when you look at the new regulations, when you look at the increase that we've got in taxation when it comes to waste management, when you look at the regulations we have to deal with the gases that come out, with the liquids, the waste there, it is not feasible anymore to do small-scale tips like we have traditionally done, because waste management is no longer small-scale. You can no longer do it on that small level, and that's based on the federal and the state regulations that are prohibiting that. Now, to those at the council table who are looking at what's before us and the recommendations before us and are disagreeing with it, that is fine, that's your democratic right. The point I'd make to you, if you're going to convince me certainly to change my mind on this, is that don't just say, but no, I don't agree with the facts. Produce evidence that your alternative is going to work. Tell me how the $171 million is a reasonable expense and is going to be cheaper for us in the long run, because I don't see that, and I don't accept flagrant ignorance towards the regulations that we are forced to deal with and the current commercial situation as being acceptable to signing up our rate space, our community members to this high extreme. The final point I want to make is to the representation from former Councillor Mackenzie, and I thank you for the representations that you've made to us as local as they were. I have spoken about the options to this with the General Manager because I am particularly concerned about the effect this will have on people living in Bracknell. I will repeat my questions here, which I think will be answered in the affirmative, that Council communicate with the Northern Midlands Council to ensure that people in Bracknell and surrounding areas can access Longford in the same way that people in Padstown and Prospect Vale access Launceston, where they can take their tip tickets and that will be accepted and charged to us. And I'll also ask that we review our waste service collection and do a survey to expand that in the regional areas. But overall, it comes back to that $171 million variation. We are a small council. We have an annual income stream of about $21 million. How the hell are we meant to afford something like that in good faith and good consciousness? We can't do it. And so that I'll be accepting a recommendation and voting in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor House is second of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Many of the points I was going to make have been made, and very well too. I'd seek your indulgence if I could to just maybe repeat some of those points in my own way, because I think they're incredibly important. And I'd say, first of all, that not all council decisions are easy. We saw that in planning, nor are they universally popular. But we are charged with responsible management and oversight, and we have to make responsible decisions, including not burdening current generations or future generations with ongoing costs and environmental concerns, as has been raised. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on waste or waste management. However, we have sought independent advice. We've got the council, I think, has done a very good job to seek that advice, and I think we'd be wise to really study that and accept it. Council have quite correctly taken that advice, and again, at the risk of repeating a couple of things, so I hope you let me go on. The reports and findings are clear as far as I'm concerned. Westbury, or the Pluin landfill, and also Deloraine landfill cells are near or at full capacity or end of life. We've known that's coming. Environmental compliance and the ever-increasing costs of that will become increasingly onerous and costly. This is not council's fault. It is a reality. The option of a new landfill facility has been explored and professionally analysed and dissected. It just does not stack up financially or environmentally, as far as I can see, and further to Councillor Dudman's points. And it's interesting that I made a big point about 171 million too. The numbers speak for themselves. Potentially 171 million, variance over the life cycle. I'd take a lot of convincing that burdening future generations of this municipality, including my own children and grandchildren and others that are fortunate enough to live here, that an extra $171 million was a sound fiscal decision and a responsible decision. And I would urge everyone to really read and dissect the report. I know it doesn't make great reading sometimes, and maybe it's not always going to align with everyone's thinking, but it is compelling. These discussions have been going on a long time, and it really is time to make a decision. It really is time to do what needs to be done and show some leadership. It's not just the cost of the landfill sites. It's also the 30 years of aftercare, which has been spoken about before. The costs of that, the workplace deployment of that, and who's to say that 30 years won't increase in the future to something beyond that? We just don't know. I think we need to abandon ideas of any further landfill sites, or at least at this point, and follow the science and prudent advice we've been given. And finally, well, there's a lot of points I could have made, but I think they've been made already. The environmental impacts are clearly outlined in Table 3. None more telling than with landfill facilities, greenhouse gases are discharged to the atmosphere. Whereas with more advanced regional facilities, these gases can be used as energy sources, for example, and minimised. We've spoken at length about FOGO and the need to minimise waste. I too thank former Councillor Mackenzie for raising those points. They are hard decisions. Change is difficult. However, this generation, and maybe I'll end there, this generation generates enormous amounts of waste. We all do, more than any other generation before us. It's our responsibility to make sure that we deal with that appropriately. And I support the motion on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillor Cameron.
I am not sure that what I say today will really do this justice, because this is a big day, and a day that we have been waiting for a long time. There's been a lot of discussion around the first time that we as councillors started talking about this, and I've always said from the moment I got on council in 2018, what we do with our waste and how we manage it is our number one issue. And it has been in the past, and it probably still will be into the future. So I could talk forever about what I think about waste and how we manage it. But I am really proud of this council, our staff, and the Mayor and GM for making sure that this is here today on the table. This is a really big and really hard decision, and one that will probably I guess it will maybe upset or frustrate a few people, but there's probably nothing worse than a bunch of decision makers that don't make a decision. So I am really proud of all of us here today. It's going to be a hard transition, but I know, I think I said in one of my responses, we've talked about waste more times than I've had hot dinners, and we will continue to talk about waste. It is a huge, huge, complex issue for us, but we need to move forward. We need to make a decision. Regardless of what we want or how we feel about it, $171 million hits me in the face every single time. So I think it is a wise decision, and I am very happy to support it today.
Thanks, Councillor. Open to Councillor Loader.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and I concur with all the speakers so far on this motion. A few points, and just repeating the cost. It just doesn't make sense not to close the Cluin site. It's just too expensive. Then there's the compliance, and I know I'm repeating what people have said, but 30 years after it closes, at this point in time, 30 years, the council has to manage a site that's not doing anything for the community. It's done stuff for the community, but for 30 years into the future, it's just going to cost money and officer time. So that doesn't make any sense. Another consideration for me when looking at this is that during the Future of Local Government review, the community came back very strongly to council that they wanted us to work collaboratively with other councils and reduce costs. Well, this is an example of what the community is wanting from us there. I do have a concern though, and I don't know how many times I've had calls. They started on Sunday. Somebody shared former Councillor Mackenzie's Facebook post with me, and from then on the phone rang hot, and so did Messenger. But once I sat down with the first person, and really explained to them why this was happening, they basically came back and said, well, this is going to be short-term pain for me. I'm so used to bombing down to Cluin Tip. I'm going to have to change the way I do things. But now I fully understand why the decision could be made if we pass this motion today. They were on board. So I think the short-term pain versus the long-term benefits of supporting this motion today, it's just a no-brainer for me. So I will be supporting it. And as I said in my monologue about FOGO, we do need to reduce, reuse, recycle. We have to. We have too much waste. We need to do something. We're just making more and more and more rubbish for future generations to deal with. And I am totally committed to making decisions that are good for us today, but also for future generations. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor Cronshaw.
I agree with this. I think we need to do this. As councillor Loda said, when she explained it to the person that she spoke to, what was happening at the clue and what it represented. Do we, what I'm proposing is, should we go out to the people in that area and just explain to them as to why that will be closed down and what their options will be in regards to their collection, plus their recycling and so forth. Because to a lot of people, they're important. And I think we need to explain to them so they know why we are doing this.
Yep, the comment, General Manager.
Yeah, sure, Ken. So that's right. If the decision is made today, as per the recommendation, that council officers will be undertaking a series of communications with all residents, but then those that are in the more affected areas and localities, and what it means to them, what options that they have. But as Councillor Dudman also referred to earlier, looking at expansion of curbside collection areas also in the areas that are unserviced currently, but could be expanded upon. So we'll be looking at that. I know that our project manager Waste has been working with the contractor around that. So if the decision is made today, yes, communications is part of it, but there is a lot of work that will still be required for us moving forward. I think that education was mentioned, trying to achieve better diversion of waste away from landfill. That doesn't stop. So there's still a lot of work for us to do in our waste space, rehabilitating the landfill areas when they close. That's a big project in itself. Finalising the conversion of our Deloraine facility to a transfer station, a contemporary facility with a better tip shop, sorting area, green waste area. So there's still a lot of work for us to do, but you're right. Once a decision has been made one way or another, then communication will be very important.
Could I also just follow up, I guess, we are heading into a stage of recycling across the state that we haven't seen before with the container buyback scheme. We actually don't know how that's going to affect the recycling as it comes into our waste transfer station. So I guess that's an unknown. We all hope that it will be really good, but again, that may change the amount of waste that comes into or recycling comes into our facilities. Open up for discussion, Councillor Temple.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope that Launceston and Darlington don't hear comments that have been made previously that they can up their prices, and we'll still take it because there's such a great difference in the saving.
I think that's a misrepresentation, councillor.
Well, but that's what it's saying. And I'd like to say that, yes, I'll be supporting the motion here today. But in doing that, I believe the future has to remain fluid. We have to look at options regularly. We have to make sure that we are on track, that we're doing it the most environmentally sensitive way. We're doing it the cheapest way that's available to us. I think we also ought to be looking at transfer stations. We need to look at it holistically. We are expecting people to have to travel further. We don't know how many kilometres we're expecting our ratepayers to have to travel, the amount of time they're going to have to put into that extra travel, the frustration that may cause, the potential of people dumping rubbish where they shouldn't, all those sorts of things, that it may be advantageous to have a transfer station somewhere between, based on population and distance, where we can make great savings for the community. So I think we should be looking at that in the future. So what I'm saying is, although I will be voting for this today, I don't see it as something we set and forget. It has to remain fluid, and we have to keep looking at better ways into the future.
Thanks, Councillor. I think we should always be reviewing and renewing and looking. Absolutely. Open up any other Councillor Sinfield.
Yes, I see this matter radically differently. To be frank, I don't believe it was a like-for-like comparison, even though there are, you know, disparate elements to it. I've heard in the discussion said already things such as, you know, greenhouse gases from landfill are captured and used to generate energy. The answer is, and we all had access to the video we were directed to a fortnight ago, some greenhouse gases are captured, roughly half at Remount Road. So half isn't, but there is nothing precluding us from having the same system on a smaller scale. The only, I'm going to the end point, the only good thing I see out of this, the motion as worded actually says that it can go to a regional. 4. Delegate directs the council office to implement the transportation of landfill waste collected at the Deloraine transfer station to a regional waste facility. Well, optimistically, that might be Deloraine. So we'll wait and see. But in my view, there's a whole lot of measures there that a comment's been made by the consultant that isn't a like-for-like comparison. And that's very sad in my view. I just, you know, in the last day or two, looking at our cost per trailer, for example, there's a cost there of about $30 up to a certain sized vehicle, $30 a cubic metre, or depending on how dense that load might be, compared to Launceston City Council's current per tonne requirement of $189. Quite a differential, I would suspect. I also did a bit further investigation over both Dalverton and Launceston. The same consultant we used appeared in a video on behalf of Launceston City Council back when they were the acting director in 2017 for a new cell that's well and truly full, that they said at the time would cost, construction cost of 8-point-something million. It came in at $10 million, and that included additional roading. Well, you know, we understand that Launceston is operating on a full cost recovery basis, and to us as an external entity, 7% on top of it. That's the premium. So for a start, presumably we're not going to be paying ourselves a premium if we do it in-house. That's illogical, and Launceston would never do it. We also know that, as I've mentioned previously, Dalverton has issues with being on a fault line on or adjacent to. They've had issues with flooding. They're sitting on karst. And if you read, which I have now started to read more comprehensively, the landfill suitability guidelines 2004 that we're still operating under, that there are 3 trigger points for issues. I'm not saying they're not well-run facilities. The current landfill cell that we were directed to on the video is well on the way to being full. They expect it to have a 5-year lifetime. Every time these things are done, you are likely to have an ever-increasing level of compliance. One of the major things that I don't see addressed in this issue is the consultant proposed to start a new cell at Deloraine at the top of the adjoining gully. Why you wouldn't start it against the existing landfill, where it's a much deeper and much bigger volume and would last for years, is beyond me. And it's quite easy to direct land flow water around that site as it is to start at the top of the gully and have to deal with it against the existing, as you do now, deal with it against the existing cell. We've had Deloraine, whilst volumes might be increasing, Deloraine landfill site has lasted since before I started taking rubbish to landfill. And we know how big it is, and we know what it is in terms of cells. And as I say, the EPA requirements are changing, etc., but that's changing for everybody. I can't ignore the comment made earlier on from Ms. Hutchinson, Helen, not here now, I don't think, about, you know, we talk about food miles. We had at the Economic Forum last week a comment from one of our staff members about the increasing number of local quarries in our municipality. Presumably one of the drivers of that is to reduce the amount of mileage that they're, I'm not saying it's the only factor, but reducing the amount of mileage to cut that for road building purposes. Here we are going in the opposite direction. So we've had a company that's carted gravel from the Nook, very close to Dalton, have in the last couple of years set up a quarry not very far from, in a straight line from our Deloraine refuse site. So we have the, if you like, the same argument working in reverse. One saying, let's get it closer. Here we are with a model that's saying, let's take it in the further direction. So I absolutely refute and reject, and I don't need to be an expert to refute the 171 million. I just think that's a nonsense. As I say, I would have liked to have seen an assessment that more closely assessed the relevant factors that one would take into account in terms of scalability. You know, we had presented to us that Launceston's compactor is 10 tonne heavier than our current ones, and that therefore they're getting greater densities in landfill and the height and all the rest of it. But if you're using the Mickey Mouse comparison, and the point there is that is Launceston's 10 tonne heavier compactor the last one available on the planet? Of course not. We could go out and get one the same or heavier. I just think we are not comparing like for like, and I believe it's a poor outcome, and I certainly won't be supporting.
Thanks, Councillor. I disagree with you, but on quite a few points. One of the surprises I had when I became mayor was that there was a report that sat at this table in front of a previous council, of which you all were a part of, that said that the tips at Deloraine and Fluham were going to be full very, very shortly from when we became. And they were, they are, they're over full. We've got to do something. And here we are, as Councillor Deputy Mayor said, we have talked about this no end. We had councillors from the previous council, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Sheriff, that were wanting us to look at the alternative site, which is a new tip cell beside the Deloraine Council. We had a bus trip out there. We looked at the old quarry that was there that's disused at the moment. We looked at that. We said that we will go down the path of having a proper review of opening up a new cell. We've got that review. We've got that report. Regardless of what you think of the report, it's done by somebody who is an expert in that field. And it has been put in front of us. Now we have to make a decision whether some of us like it or not for the greater good of the community. And we will be making a decision for the greater good of the community with this decision. And to former Councillor McKendrick, who's in the room at the moment, his thoughts of the Bracknell situation. I live at Meander, and Meander has a waste transfer station that sits on private property. We don't have garbage collection at Meander in any way, shape or form. We have to take our rubbish to either Deloraine or potentially Mole Creek Waste Transfer Station or to Meander. I guess if the people of West Bracknell are concerned about that, they may look at doing what the residents of Meander did and set up their own little waste transfer station. But Bracknell has pickup of rubbish within the town. So we don't at Meander. So I guess it's something, as I said earlier, no, sorry, I can't let you respond. I guess as my comment is further from before, other municipalities have gone holus bolus. Every property gets spins, whether they wanted it or not. We are piecemealing our way across the municipality. We're getting FOGO out there in places. We cannot continue to put rubbish in tips that are full. We just can't do it. And we've got the information there, and as Councillor House and Dudman said, 171 million over the life of this. How can we? How can we? To the other point of transporting rubbish around, you get economies of scale. We will get economies of scale as to where we take our rubbish in the future. So I'm happy to support this. We've got some work to do. We've got to go out to the community and let them know exactly to Councillor Cronshaw's point of why we're doing it, the reasons behind it. But that's an argument that I'm happy to have and take forward and put our position forward. So I'm happy to support this. Councillor Smedley, you had a hand up to make comment.
Just going to mention that I'm supportive of this recommendation as well. It's obviously the direction we need to head. Opportunity cost of not doing so would be very significant to the community for some time to come. So there's about 171 million reasons I would like to support this.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Temple.
Just a question relating to what's come up in the last few minutes. Is there anything that we'll be backloading from Alberton or Launceston? Because we've got trucks going one way full of stuff. Do they bring you anything back?
That would be a question that would go to our contractors, because obviously we enter into a contract with the two companies or whichever, and it's not for us to say, I don't imagine.
Look, I guess we're asking for council's decision around the model, Councillor Temple. So I guess we're talking about this occurring in a few years when we're expecting the Westbury landfill area to be complete and needing to be rehabilitated. So perhaps it's slightly different at that point in time. So we're not committing to do that today. And we're not committing to who will be driving the trucks, what the trucks look like, the battery or fuel technology, that sort of thing. So yeah, I can see your point and maybe so we'll investigate all options when we come close to that point in time.
Sorry.
Councillor Cameron.
I just want a clarification if I can. We talk a little bit about increasing the rollout of collection services to those that don't have it. And I know when I first got on council, a letter was sent out to the entire municipality around increasing the collection. And my personal experience was that was not very well received. But in saying that, there are areas that are increasingly coming to myself and I know fellow councillors saying about their collection, and a lot of them live just outside a collection area. So just would like to clarify, what is the process that those people should take if they currently don't receive roadside collection but are interested in the future? Is there something that they should be doing at the moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're right. At different periods, different points in time, we've surveyed different areas of the municipality. So I'll just clarify that actually. I think I have the information. Within Meander Valley, we have about 11,000 properties, 7,145 get curbside bin collection, 3,867 do not. 2019, we surveyed a number of different areas, including some of the townships that I mentioned today, Meander, and asked them whether they would be interested in. I guess your question about what would they do, we actually do get quite a few people that don't get collection contacting council, and our infrastructure department receive those inquiries and keep a log of who's expressed interest. We have surveyed different areas before. We're currently looking at an area near the Cluin landfill area for a potential expansion of the curbside collection area. We would be reliant on our contractors being able to collect. That's something else that we need to bear in mind, that road access to all areas of the municipality isn't straightforward. Reversing trucks in some spots isn't practical. So where we can, I guess we will explore it again in the future, and our project manager for waste is currently looking at that sort of Bracknell Whitemore catchment as a potential expansion.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, councillors? If not, Councillor House is the second on the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess as councillors, we only sit around this table, for a very short period of time, the overall scheme of things, but the decisions we make in matters such as this have got long-lasting implications. And, excuse me, and waste is challenging. We're already hearing about how long this discussion's been going on one way or another. And I'm really pleased and proud that as a group, we can actually make something happen and not kick can any further down the road. Something has to happen. We're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. But also, I'd like to really thank the staff that have put so much work into this in time gone by, because I can only imagine the countless hours that have gone into this to try and give us the advice that we need to have, expert advice, which I'm prepared to abide by. But I would just make a point, if I could. I'm really pleased that there's been lots of discussion about, for those that are disadvantaged by these decisions, or believe that they are, we are already talking about ways that we can minimise those matters, those issues, and that we can make life a little easier for those that feel that they are disadvantaged. I think it's a really positive thing. Change is tough, no question, as we spoke about before, but I think it would be irresponsible of us to not make the decision to move forward.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dudman, move the motion.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm sorry for taking so much speaking time off today, but I think this item in particular is one that is worth spending some time on. So on that basis, I did have 4 questions. I believe one of them's already asked, and then I'll make a couple of concluding remarks. In terms of the commitment to survey residents in regional areas, in particular those that are going to be most affected by this closure, so Pluin, Bracknell and Whitewell, we do have a commitment that we will, in the near future, survey them for potential curbside collections.
So currently looking at that.
Can we have a commitment that we will discuss with the Northern Midlands Council the opportunity for them to accept our tip passes at the Longford Refuse Centre?
Yeah, my advice is that we did look at that with other councils when we brought in the tip tickets a few years ago now, and which are offered at Remount Road facility, Launceston facility. And it wasn't an option from a processing, process practical perspective at that point in time, but we can reconsider that and ask the question. Yep.
In terms of the variation, well, I guess in terms of the costing of the new landfill facility that is listed on table 1, do we have the cash reserves that could fund this, or would we be relying heavily on borrowings if we were to accept an alternative in developing a new landfill facility?
Sorry, just reading this. Table 1. So if council were to change the recommendation and consider construction of a new landfill facility, and the initial estimates that were provided indicate an investment of over $14 million in the first 5 years, and council doesn't have that volume of money, so we would be borrowing, and I would suggest that for every cell beyond that, we would be borrowing.
And the final question on that, the figures that we have in table 1 regarding the new landfill facility, does that include interest on the borrowings that we would have to incur?
No, it doesn't. That would be in addition to that cost estimate.
Thank you. So in response to a couple of the points that were raised, Councillor Temple, in reference to my comment about the duopoly, I think you missed the point that I raised that Australian law prohibits that. And in this instance, it would be easily detectable as a duopoly. To Councillor Sinfield's comments about Remount Road and their greenhouse gas capture at 50%, I'll take that point. I personally haven't pointed it or alleged it was anywhere near 100%, but 50% is the figure. Currently Pluin at 0%. My hypothesis on the economy of scale is that into the future it would still be 0%. So that at a base level is an improvement. In terms of the 7% premium Launceston's charging to get cost recovery, well, that variation that we have in table 1 is 64%. So that's quite a variation we have to claw back. And I'll take your point that, and I'm sorry that I'm directing most of my comments towards Councillor Sinfield, but it's the nature of being in a minority of one at this stage. In terms of not accepting the report, look, I accept if, for whatever reason, anyone here doesn't think or thinks that there's flaws in the report. But if you're going to make that point, and if you're going to say that there's the 171 million is a gross overstatement, then there's got to be some basis of evidence. And even if we take a variation in these reports, which is usually between 3 and 5%, that's still a long way off the 64% variation that we've got there. In terms of mileage versus methane, I think we've also got to acknowledge that, yes, we'll be trucking the rubbish elsewhere, but the management options that we have at Dalberton and at Greenmount Road, in terms of limiting the effect of greenhouse gases on the environment, is a lot greater and more advanced than what we have at Cloyne, which is we dump it and let it fester. So in conclusion, there are numerous reasons from environmental to community that I'm supporting this motion, but it does come back to that variation of 171 million. We want to spend $500 million plus the borrowings of that to complete a new landfill. I don't accept that. I don't accept that for our future generations because that's who's paying for it. As a 27-year-old, the youngest person at this table, I do not accept that bill. And I'm happy to have that on my record. But as I said, I appreciate the concerns that have come from the community, especially the ones that Macca has raised on behalf of his community. I don't think he's going to be happy with the way I'm voting, but the commitment is there that I'll continue to support the community out that way to make sure that the effects are minimised. But this is not an option that I see as open to us. I think the only option is the one that's recommended, and I'm more than happy to support that.
Very good. That was you wrapping up, Councillor Dunn.
That was.
Thank you. I'm going to put the motion to all those in favour.
I'm sorry, Councillor Dudman brought up a whole lot of new issues there. Should we address them or not?
No, because he was wrapping up and he was responding to.
But he was bringing up new issues in his wrapping up.
Not to my.
New issues there. There were some
issues. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. That is Johnson, Cameron, Cronshaw, Dudman, Smedley, Temple, Loader and House. Against? Enfield. Motion is passed. Thank you. Moving over. Okay. So there's no closed agenda for this meeting unless anyone has any leave of absence applications. Not today. All right. I declare the meeting closed at 5:18 p.m. So, got chosen recording off, mate.
Yeah.
Very nice to all.